Hey, what is going on, guys? This is Jason with Jadren Aquatics. Thanks for hanging out with me in the fish room again today. Today we are going to talk more about taking rainbow fish eggs and actually hatching those things out and then trying to grow them up to adults. If you missed the first video that I did on breeding angels, I'll link that above. You want to watch that first so you know the whole process, because this video is going to start whenever we have that mop with some eggs in it. We're going to show you what you do from then on out. I'm going to show you a few different techniques that you can use. You can try out every single one of them if you want to. It's just a great way to actually learn how to raise rainbow fry up, because rainbow fry are some of the most difficult fry to raise up because of the fact that they're born so small. So their mouths are so small. So there's only very few things that they can actually eat. Now in the wild, there's so much stuff that's around them to eat. The only thing they really have to worry about is stuff predating on them, eating them. Whereas in our aquariums, the main thing they need to worry about is just getting some type of food to get them big enough so that they can finally eat on live baby brine shrimp, which is really easy to hatch out. So let's go ahead and let's start this thing up so I can show you guys the different ways to do this. Okay, so you've pulled your mop out of your rainbow tank and you see this thing is covered with hundreds and hundreds of eggs. You're so excited, but you have no idea what to do next. Don't panic, we're gonna walk you through it. It's actually extremely easy. So the first thing that I like to do is I like to take these. Now these are just some simple plastic containers with some plastic lids, just some cheap ones that you can, I buy these from Target. It doesn't necessarily matter what you use. You just need a small container that can hold, 2 or 3 cups of water, and that's really all you need. These just work good because you can buy 4 or 5 of these at a time for like $2 or $3, so it doesn't cost much. I have so many different fish that are breeding all the time that I use a lot of these, and I use them all the time, so these things come in awesome handiness. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to take this, and then we're going to, you got a choice. You can actually take water from the tank water, or if you have some aged water, or if you have some, you just need to make sure you take some water that does not have any chloramines or chlorine in it. And then you're going to take this thing and you're going to fill it up, not all the way to the top, maybe to about right here. And then the next step that we're going to do is this. We're going to take this, we're going to take methylene blue. I'll link this below if you guys are interested in actually purchasing it. This bottle will last you an eternity because you don't use very much of it at all. So then you're just going to take this, and I usually take about 1 or 2 drops and then I put it into the water. So as you can see here in my container, you can see about how much water is in it. Again, I put 2 drops in it, so you can get an idea of kind of about how blue it needs to be. It's not really critical exactly how, but you don't want to put a ton of it in there, and you don't want it to where it's just barely blue. But the whole idea of the methylene blue is this is to keep your eggs from fungusing. Because one of the things about rainbow eggs is they'll usually take about 7 days before they actually hatch. So they have to sit in that water for a long time. So I can guarantee you, if you don't use this, you are going to have some that have fungus. You'll have some that were actually not fertilized that'll turn white, and they'll fungus quickly. And when they fungus, if there's one anywhere near it, that fungus will spread over to it, and it'll kill every single one of your good eggs. So you definitely want to use this stuff to put into the water to prevent that from happening. Okay, so you've sat there and you've pulled off every single one of those eggs. Remember, you can touch it with your fingers. It's not that big of a deal. Just make sure you don't have lotion or oil or something in your hands. Pull off every single one of those eggs, put it into this container. Then the best thing to do is take some masking tape and write the name of the fish on there and write the date so you have an idea when you put those eggs in there. And then you simply can take a top, snap that top on, and then just find some place to put this. You want to keep this thing at about the same room temperature that you were keeping your tank at. Since my fish room stays about 78 degrees all the time, I can simply just put it on a counter anywhere and it's going to be fine. So you can just let this sit, and you really don't even need to look at it for 5 or 6 days. And then after that 5 or 6 days, you're going to want to start checking it daily to find out if there are any babies that have hatched in it. Alright, so it's day 7. You've been checking this for a couple of days now. You open it up on day 7 and you look inside and you see hundreds of little babies that are swimming all over the place. These guys are hungry. Rainbow fish are not born with very big egg yolk sacs, so they can't feed themselves for very long, so they're going to be looking for food very, very quickly. And you want to get them out of this methylene blue water. So what I like to do is you really have 2 decisions on how to get them out. I find that using a little small net like this is a lot easier to scoop them out, because the rainbow fish tend to go to the top of the water where it's a lot easier to catch them. Or you can use the turkey baster just to kind of suck them out. The only problem with this is you're going to end up getting a whole bunch of that methylene blue water out of there, which is not that big of a deal, but you want to try to avoid as much as you can. So then the next thing, as you're catching these, again, you can take just another container like this, and then you can take that container, you can come over here to your tank and just pour some tank water into this. And then as you're pulling the babies out of here, you can now put them into this water. So now you got them in some good, clean tank water. Once you get them into that water, then you are ready to start feeding them. So I'm going to show you guys how we do that. I'm going to show you guys a little bit differently how I don't use these after I take the babies out. Because if you do use these, you need to know that you need to change the water out. You probably want to do about a 50% water change on this every couple of days. And when I would do the water changes, I would continue to take the water from the tank that they came out of as the water that you're changing out of there. So it's good aged water that also has some beneficial bacteria in it, so that it's taking care of it. And another thing that I like to do when I have these is I like to take just a little bit of Java moss that's been growing in a tank and put it in here also. And then I like to put at least 1 or 2 small snails, like ram's horn snails. That way, when you put that Java moss in there, that Java moss acts, because it has a bunch of that bacteria in it, so it acts as a filter for the waste and stuff to be taken care of. And then those snails will come through and they'll eat any of the food that doesn't get eaten by the babies, because you don't want this water to go bad. Again, one of the reasons I don't like using this is because if you don't do regular water changes on it, you can end up with a lot of problems and end up killing them off. So let's move over to the next set of where I put my babies at. Okay, so here's the way that I grow fry out. I'll link the video above so you guys can see exactly how this is built. So this thing's on a 20-gallon tank, so this water is being recirculated through each one of these containers just constantly through these drippers that are here. So these are getting constant fresh water, and then also I'm having, through my normal water changes, I have an automatic dripper that's replacing about 5 gallons of this water every single day. So they're getting tons and tons of fresh water. And then also I run a heater on this tank, and I raise this tank to about 82 or 83 degrees. The reason I do that is because the fry's metabolism rate rises, and therefore they eat more and then they grow faster. You don't have to do that, but that's just a way if you're trying to get your fry up to grow faster. So I'll kind of show you the inside of one of these. So as you look in here, you can see kind of what I said before, that we use a little bit of Java moss in each one of them, and then you'll see there's snails in each one. Yeah, I know some of them have like 1,000 snails, because when you take that one snail and put it in there, it's not very long before they lay eggs and then have 1,000 snails that are in there. But these I only, typically these are only in here less than a month before I'm cleaning them out and moving on, because the fish got too big to actually be in here. Okay, so what I like to use is golden pearls. This is just a mixture of stuff. You can see all the different ingredients they put in it, but this stuff is specially made so that it's extremely small, so even the smallest of fish can actually eat it. And also the way it's prepared is it's made so that this stuff floats on the surface, and again, once you put it in there, it is so tiny you can't see it, but you could, right as you put it in, it'll spread real quickly all over the surface, and then you kind of can't even see it again. I'll link this above so you guys can find this. This stuff comes in all sorts of different sizes. And so let's go ahead and let's feed them so you can see kind of how this stuff works. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to remove the golden pearls and put them in a different container that has a lid on it like this one. That way I can screw this on tightly, because anytime I have powdered food that has a Ziploc top, I always forget to tighten it well enough and moisture gets in there and then it funguses and then I lose it all. So I take this and I filled this up, you know, maybe halfway, because this stuff will last forever, and then I take the bag and I seal it good and I put it in the refrigerator so that if I mess this up, I know I've still got some rest in there. Some of the Hikari first bites that you use, that happens to me all the time. And so what I like to do is, this is what one of my subscribers actually showed me, is just this fantastic way of feeding this stuff, because it's so fine. What I've done is, you can see I actually had this Velcroed here so that I don't lose it. This is one of my wife's fancy makeup brushes. I think this is actually a Clinique brand, so this is probably like $5,000 or more. So I like to use one of these because this is great for putting on makeup because it picks up really fine dust. So you can just take this and just lightly put it in here, and then you can see how it just gets all over it. And then if you just tap it, it'll just rain that stuff down. And that way you can control easier how much of this stuff you let off. Because if you try to dump this stuff in here into the water and any of those little hard pieces fall in there, they're just gonna sink to the bottom. You want this stuff to actually land on the water and float so that the fry can see it. And this stuff will float for a long time. So we'll just dip it in there, get a little bit on there like that, tap it off a little bit so we don't have too much, and then we just come over here to this. So we just come over to it like this, and then we just tap it lightly on the side, and we can see that it just kind of rains the stuff down. Or you can kind of take your finger in it like this and flick it a little bit, and you can just flick it onto the water like that. And again, once that stuff hits the water, it's like almost impossible to see because it's so fine. But this is really just a great way. If you don't have one of these, you can get maybe just like a simple cheap paintbrush, you know, the little small kind, like the little kids paint by number. Just something like that. That's a really easy way to distribute this stuff to the fish. Okay, so you've now been feeding them the golden pearls, and it's been about a week. At this point, they probably should now be big enough to actually eat something a little bit bigger that's a little bit easier. Sometimes when they grow up golden pearls, the small size that we use can become too small for them. Now you can buy golden pearls in about 8 or 9 different sizes. So if you want to have a bunch of different sizes and just continually feed them golden pearls until you get them big enough to feed on flakes, you can, or you can keep feeding them those golden pearls for a long time. There's a tremendous amount of nutritional value in those if you want, so that works just fine. But what my goal is I want to get them big enough so they're actually able to eat baby brine shrimp. So I like to feed them live baby brine shrimp. If you guys don't know about creating a baby brine shrimp hatchery, I'll link that above so you guys can actually see what that looks like. But a new thing that I've discovered from one of my friends is decapsulated brine shrimp. This stuff is absolutely fantastic. Now, everything you see in here, these are all baby brine shrimp, but they have chemically removed the shell so that the fish can eat them just like this. So these have everything that the live baby brine shrimp have in them, and they're very easy to feed. Now, like the brine shrimp eggs, they're very fine. So again, I use that same makeup brush, and then you can just literally just take some like this, and you'll see it gets all over it. And then if you just go over the tank where they're at, all you have to do is just tap it, and it takes very little of this stuff because it's so small and minute that it doesn't take very much at all. But this stuff works really good for most angelfish that you're trying to raise up. But there are some angelfish that this works really good for almost every single rainbow fish that you're trying to raise up. But there are some rainbow fish that you run into that won't eat this, and the problem is because this stuff has no movement to it. When you put baby brine shrimp in there, there's so much movement, it brings out their natural ability to want to hunt food, and then the babies do much better on that because they're able to chase it and hunt it. So you need to watch this as you're feeding it and make sure that the babies are actually eating it. If they're not eating this stuff and this stuff just staying there for a long amount of time, then you need to change over to some baby brine shrimp instead. So you're pretty much set now. As you're growing them out and you're using this and the baby brine shrimp, you can continue to feed that to them. Again, you want to try to feed this stuff to them 3 to 5 times a day. It's not going to take 3 to 5 times a day to keep them alive, but that's just the way to grow them out the fastest. You need to feed them at least 2 times a day, probably for the first month. These guys grow very slow, and then you can begin to feed them just 1 time a day, but again, that's going to slow their growth down even more. It can take a long time for these rainbow fish to actually grow up to full adulthood. All right, so let's talk about another solution that you can actually do. Let's say you don't want to go through all of that work of pulling every single one of those eggs out. So now, again, you can just reach in that, you can reach in the tank here, grab this spawning mop, you squish that water off, and so now you're holding the spawning mop, and now what you can do is you can use the green water method. Now let me show you this. So if you take a look in here, you'll see I've just got a small 5-gallon container that I actually have green water in. Now, if you don't know what green water is, you probably accidentally had it in your aquarium before. So it's when a tremendous amount of algae actually builds up in the water, and the water becomes so dense green because there's so many microorganisms and algae living in the water that you literally can't see through it. Most people don't want that stuff, but it's absolutely fantastic food for baby fish. In fact, if you'll watch a lot of the videos of some of these third world countries where they're raising up large amounts of baby fish outside, they'll have these huge vats and they'll just be full of this green water, and with the sun just shining down on it, constantly repopulating that green water. If you don't know how to make green water, I don't actually have a video on it, but if you look at Dan's Fish has got a great tutorial that shows you how to make this water, and you can see what I end up doing is now here's that spawning mop that we had. We just take that spawning mop and we just actually put it in the water, and that's all we have to do. We just sit there, and that thing is going to sit in there again for about 7 days, and all those eggs that are on there are now going to hatch out into this water. And soon as it hatches out, those babies are now surrounded by millions upon millions of microorganisms that they can easily feed on whenever they want. So you don't have to worry about feeding them whatsoever because they are surrounded by a food source. Now, to keep the green water going, especially inside, I keep this light on it 24 hours a day. And then the other thing that I use is I take this Miracle Grow plant food and I put just a little bit of this stuff in every couple of days, and that provides the nutrients and stuff that green water needs to stay alive. Because if you don't feed it, it won't take very long before all this water will turn completely clear, which means that all of that green water, all those microorganisms died off, and now the fish don't have any food to eat. You can see also I've actually got a air stone going in here to kind of keep that water and stuff moving all the time. It's not necessarily critical, but this stuff can become stagnant when it sits here for a long time. I don't really ever do any water changes on this. I just constantly top it off. If you guys can perhaps maybe see down in here in the water, there are some quite a few Kamaka rainbows that I have in here right now. And so basically by using this method, you can grow them up till they're finally big enough to keep them on baby brine shrimp. Now you can leave them in here and they can continue to feed on that food for probably about 3 to 4 weeks, but then that food starts becoming too small to them to eat, so you're going to have to end up supplementing something else. So if you want, while they're in here, you can feed them baby brine shrimp in this water, or if you want, you can just take it and remove those babies out and put them in another container, or put them in a small aquarium where you can actually begin to feed them those brine shrimp or the decapsulated brine shrimp to finally get them so that they actually grow up into adults. Now I want to show you guys one other type of food that you can actually feed the baby fry when they are first born. That is using either banana worms, Walter worms, or microworms. If you look in here, this container that I have has microworms in it. This is actually a culture of them. Tons of videos online so you guys can see exactly how you culture these. You need to find someone that actually has some of these so you can take just a little bit of theirs, then take some of this oatmeal and actually put that in there, mix that in there, and then put those microworms in there, and then they'll begin to grow. And if you look along the edges here where it's coming off, you can see it, like those are actually they're nematodes is what they are. The banana worms, the Walter worms, and the microworms, they all look pretty much the same when you're just looking at them in the eye. They do the same thing where they come up the sides like this. And so it makes it really, really easy to feed, because all you have to do is just kind of scrape some of this off the side to be able to actually feed the fish. So as you can see here, I just basically just take my finger and run it alongside, and then if you look right there, there are probably, I don't know, probably 10,000 or more nematodes that are currently on my finger. Now, sometimes I get a little freaked out after I do this. Like, this doesn't bother me, but it's when I go to put my contacts in afterwards, because these things, when you put them in the water, they'll live in the water for about 24 hours. So I always think, if I didn't clean my hands good enough, am I going to have a nematode that's living in my eye for the next 24 hours? So wash your hands good before you put your contacts on. So then all I do is, whenever I put this stuff on my finger, I just simply dip it in the water like this, and you can see it just kind of form a smoky cloud, and it goes all over the water. And this stuff is great because now it's providing food for the fish to eat for the next 24 hours before these things actually die. So it makes it easier when you're not having to feed so many times a day. You can use this instead, but it's a good thing to mix this up and use some different things, you know, and you're using golden pearls sometimes, and you're using these sometimes. That tends to work out a lot better. All right, there you go, guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned a little bit on how to raise your rainbow fry up easily. You guys got any questions or comments, be sure and leave them down below. So thanks again, guys, and God bless.